Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you happen to be, at home, at work, hopefully not driving in your car as you're watching this. That would not be good. I'm Reverend Rich, pastor here at Bellevue First United Methodist Church, and welcome to our brief little time of talking about our text and our message, our learnings for today. We are in week 5 of our Faces of Our Faith worship series, which is a super cool one where we encounter individuals in texts that we don't normally encounter. And today's is from the 2nd chapter of Luke. I'm referring to my little notes here because I can't remember the verses, 21 through 38. And it's actually, it's the story of Jesus, but it's when he was a wee babe, a young one being presented at the temple, and it's largely a story about Anna and Simeon. Like all of our texts, there's more than one teaching. There's more than one thing for us to be learning from, learning about. But today, I wanted to focus on age. And this text asks us a question about what it means to get old. What does it mean to get older, to have what Joan Chittister called the gift of years? Now, this text, like all of them, has comments on other things as well, about prayer, about who Jesus is, and all of that. But let's just deal with this topic for today, and we can revisit this text later. So I want to begin by acknowledging and stating very clearly that just how poorly our culture, our society, thinks of age, right? It's like that Beatles tune, When I'm 64, I'd sing it for you, but then you would quickly turn the video off because I can't sing very well. But once, Paul McCartney, whoever wrote it, I think it's Paul singing it, talks about like when I turn 64, all they spend their time doing is losing one's hair, mending a fuse, knitting sweaters, pulling weeds in the garden. And then it asks in the refrain, like, will you need me? Will you still feed me when I'm 64? And, it's a cute little song. You probably have it in your head now. But in this song is this sense of once we get to 64, 65, retirement age, we tend to be thought of generally as fairly useless and incompetent other than like little domestic tasks and things like that. And there's tons of jokes about being over the hill and we laugh. But there's kind of a dismissive part to these jokes where, the laughs come and maybe sometimes there's truth in the humor, but it's also kind of a jab. It's like once you hit a certain point, then you're just not worth as much. And pastors sometimes make these jokes from the pulpit, and I'm probably guilty of doing that on occasion, but it reveals something larger at play in our society and our culture where we worship beauty, we worship youth and wealth above all else, right? And in our defense, it's not just our culture, it's not just the American culture, that there's many, there's an expression in Ireland that when somebody gets a little older, that they are away with the fairies. And it's, it's a fun little turn of phrase, but it's kind of a sad implication that somebody might be having cognitive issues and that once, we get older, most of us will be away with the fairies. And so most cultures in our world, but particularly those that are heavily capitalistic and consumeristic, really look down upon age, look down upon people who might have some gray hair. And we know this, right? I mean, just watch the news, watch television, click through things, and most of the advertising that's aimed at older adults has to do with adult diapers or healthcare stuff, and rarely does it depict an active, vibrant older adult living a full life. And that's why one of the reasons this text is powerful here today as we read this text. So hit pause, Luke chapter 2, verses 21 through 38. We hear the story of two persons who are older, Anna and Simeon, and yet they play a vital role in Jesus' story. And paintings of this event, so you can Google Rembrandt's painting of this, always depicts Simeon as older, but we're actually not taught Simeon's age. In the Orthodox Church, both Oriental Orthodox and Eastern Orthodox, their tradition is that at the time of this story, Simeon was around 200, which is old indeed, but we only know that he was promised to meet the Messiah before he died. So we don't really know Simeon's age, but it's sort of implied that he has the gift of years. But we are told, however, that Anna is 84. And in that day and age, 84 is very old. Like today with modern medical care, 84 is not very old. Depends on the individual, but 84 back then was quite old. And we're also told that she never leaves the temple, but worshiped there, fasting and praying day and night. And so we get the sense that she is probably devoutly passing time until she passes away. But maybe not. Maybe that's just some ageism in our thinking creeping through, that she's just sort of, winding down and counting the days until she passes away. Maybe she's a firebrand. Maybe she's in the temple fasting and praying and just stirring things up and is highly involved. We just don't know. But the ageism in our minds paints a picture of somebody who's just sort of whiling away the hours. So we don't really know how she was spending her time other than fasting and praying. But whatever her reason or however she's in that space, her presence and Simeon's presence is really important, because as Jesus is presented at the temple, they're there as witnesses. Right? And in the ancient world, witnesses are powerfully important. They convey the truth of something. Like today, if you don't capture it on video, it probably didn't happen. The role of witnesses back then was to be, catching the video, to be able to say, yes, this indeed happened. And their presence is one of affirmation, of recognizing who Jesus was and being able to see that. And then Anna, we're told, had this gift of prophecy. And what's meaningful about this is what is necessary for them to play that role, those roles of witness and as affirmation presence, and as in Anna's case, as prophetic, is that there had to be wisdom and vision and awakenedness. Right? And this is what Anna and in particular Simeon, or no, flip that, what Simeon and particularly Anna are, is that they're awakened rather than being away with the fairies. They are extraordinarily in tune, without scales over their eyes, without cataracts over their eyes, maybe due to their years of prayer and all of that. But they are the ones with clear eyes and clear hearts and clear minds. There's a 19th century Austrian author named Marie von Ebner-Eisenbach, which is a mouthful. And she said, "In youth we learn, and in age we see and understand." And so maybe that's what we have happening here with Anna, is that she can actually see and understand that her mental and spiritual capacity is not diminished with age. In fact, it is as rich and robust more than ever. And so one of the cool parts about this text is not that it glosses over the age, is that it tells us her age, which means it's important. Whenever the Bible points out specifics, it means pay attention to this. That is part of the story, and it reminds us that God, it's not that God doesn't see age, but that God doesn't see age as any sort of barrier to value or role or call or vocation. And so what that means for us today is that it means that for us, regardless of any age, I'm 52, so I'm not that far from Anna's age. I mean, a little ways to go, but I'm certainly not that far from 64 in doing all the doddering things from the Beatles song, this text reminds us that there is work for us to do, sacred work at any age. And one of the things I've experienced in my years as a pastor is that there are subtle and sometimes not so subtle ageisms at play from the higher ups, from our conference level, from the books in classes, and sometimes in the congregations themselves, that whenever we talk about church growth, we value youth over age. And I believe that's highly problematic, where we're like, okay, if we're going to, revisit the vision of a church and talk about evangelism and things like that, people almost always start really valuing younger people over older people. And I think that's problematic, right? Because we don't have that in our text. That's not a biblical way of valuing human beings. So I think there's a lot for us to learn, those of us who are in church leadership, about this as well. But today is a powerful and a hopeful reminder that the work of faith, the joy and reward of faith, is ageless, that God needs us to do God's good work in the world, whether we're 14, 34, 64, or 84. And for that we give thanks. So I hope you are well, and I will see you next week. Amen.